it is not advisable to bid on electrical work for a project that is intentionally avoiding permits and inspections. Such actions are illegal and unethical, and they carry significant risks. The project described involves adding a family room, bedroom, office, full bathroom, and utility room to an existing structure encompassing 1,200 square feet. This type of project invariably requires adherence to local building codes and necessitates obtaining the appropriate permits. Working without permits and inspections introduces numerous potential problems. Firstly, the electrical work may not meet the minimum safety standards outlined in the National Electrical Code or local electrical codes. This can lead to hazards such as electrical shocks, fires, and equipment malfunctions. Secondly, without proper inspections, there is no independent verification that the electrical system has been installed correctly and safely. This can leave the occupants vulnerable to hidden dangers that may not be immediately apparent. Thirdly, should a fire or other electrical incident occur, the lack of permits and inspections can invalidate insurance coverage, leaving the property owner financially responsible for all damages. Reputable electrical contractors understand the importance of adhering to built-in codes and safety regulations. They obtain the necessary permits and inspections to ensure that their work meets the required standards. They are also licensed, bonded, and insured to protect themselves and their clients from potential liabilities. As an electrician, it is your professional responsibility to uphold the law and protect the public's safety. Participating in unlicensed and unpermitted work undermines the safety standards and regulations that are in place to protect everyone. If you encounter situations where property owners or general contractors are attempting to circumvent the permitting process, it is important to report them to the appropriate authorities. This could include the local building department, the electrical inspector, or the state licensing board. Reporting such violations helps to ensure that the project is completed safely and legally, and that all electrical work meets the required standards. There are several key considerations when evaluating whether to bid on an electrical project. Firstly, always verify that the necessary permits have been obtained or are in the process of being obtained. Request to seek copies of the permits before submitting your bid. Secondly, ensure that the project plans include detailed electrical drawings that comply with the National Electrical Code and local codes. Thirdly, confirm that the project will be inspected by a qualified electrical inspector upon completion. Fourthly, if you have any doubts about the legality or safety of the project, do not hesitate to decline the work. Your reputation and your license are too valuable to risk on a questionable project. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides comprehensive guidelines for safe electrical installations. It covers topics such as wiring methods, overcurrent protection, grounding, and equipment installation. Local electrical codes often adopt the NEC with some modifications to address specific local conditions or requirements. When performing electrical work, it is essential to comply with all applicable codes and regulations. Some specific code requirements that are often relevant to residential electrical projects include, but are not limited to, Article 210.8, which covers ground fault circuit interrupter protection, or GFCI protection for receptacles in bathrooms, kitchens, and other wet locations. Article 250 addresses grounding and bonding requirements to ensure a safe path for fault currents. Article 310.15 and associated tables dictate the allowable ampacity of conductors based on their size, insulation type, and installation conditions. Article 404.2 covers the installation of switches and their proper wiring. Article 406.4 addresses the installation of receptacles and their secure mounting. Article 408.36 covers overcurrent protection requirements for panel boards. When working on a residential project, it is crucial to properly size the service entrance conductors and the overcurrent protection device to handle the anticipated electrical load. A load calculation should be performed in accordance with Article 220 of the NEC to determine the total demand load of the dwelling. The service entrance conductors and overcurrent protection device should be sized to carry this load without exceeding their ampacity ratings. For example, If the load calculation indicates a demand load of 150 amps, the service entrance conductors should have an ampacity of at least 150 amps, and the main breaker should be rated at 150 amps or higher. It is also important to ensure that all branch circuits are properly sized and protected with the appropriate overcurrent devices. For example, a 15 amp circuit should be wired with 14 American wire gauge copper conductors and protected by a 15 amp circuit breaker. A 20 amp circuit should be wired with 12 AWG copper conductors and protected by a 20 amp circuit breaker. When installing receptacles, it is essential to use the correct type of receptacle for the application. Ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, receptacles are required in bathrooms, kitchens, and other wet locations to protect against electrical shock hazards. Arc fault circuit interrupter, or RFSI, breakers are required in bedrooms and other areas to protect against fire hazards caused by arc faults. When wiring a bathroom, it is important to follow the specific requirements for lighting, receptacles, and ventilation. Lighting fixtures should be located so that they cannot be touched by a person using the bathtub or shower. Receptacles should be GFCI protected and located at least 3 feet away from the tub or shower. A ventilation fan is required to remove moisture and prevent mold growth. When wiring a kitchen, it is important to provide adequate receptacle outlets to meet the needs of the appliances and countertop use. Countertop receptacles should be GFCI protected. At least 2 20 amp small appliance branch circuits are required to serve the countertop receptacles. A separate 20 amp circuit is required for the refrigerator. A separate circuit is also typically required for the range, oven, dishwasher, and garbage disposal. When wiring a bedroom, it is important to install arc fault circuit interrupter or RFSI breakers to protect against fire hazards. Smoke detectors are also required in each bedroom and should be interconnected so that if one detector sounds, all detectors will sound. When working on a new addition or renovation project, it is important to consider the existing electrical system and ensure that it is adequate to handle the additional load. The existing service entrance conductors and panel board may need to be upgraded to accommodate the new load. It is also important to ensure that the existing wiring is in good condition and meets current code requirements. If the existing wiring is outdated or damaged, it should be replaced. When running new wiring, it is important to follow the correct wiring methods and use the appropriate materials. Non-metallic sheath cable, or NM cable, is commonly used for residential wiring. NM cable should be properly supported and protected from physical damage. When running NM cable through walls or floors, it should be protected by nail plates to prevent it from being penetrated by nails or screws. When working with metal conduit, it is important to properly ground the conduit system to provide a safe path for fault currents. Metal conduit should be connected to ground using grounding bushings and grounding conductors. When installing electrical equipment, it is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions and ensure that the equipment is properly grounded. Electrical equipment should be installed in a location that is accessible for maintenance and repair. Electrical equipment should also be protected from moisture and physical damage. When terminating wires, it is important to use the correct size and type of wire connectors. Wire connectors should be properly tightened to ensure secure connection. Loose wire connections can cause overheating and electrical fires. When working with electrical panels, it is important to follow proper safety procedures to avoid electrical shock hazards. Always turn off the power to the panel before working on it. Use insulated tools and wear rubber gloves to protect yourself from electrical shock. When working with electricity, it is important to be aware of the potential hazards and take the necessary precautions to protect yourself and others. Electricity can be dangerous, but it can be used safely if you follow the proper procedures and use the correct equipment. Always consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns about electrical work. When estimating the cost of an electrical project, it is important to consider all of the factors involved, including the cost of materials, labor, permits, and inspections. The cost of materials can vary depending on the type of wiring, fixtures, and equipment that are required. The cost of labor will depend on the electrician's hourly rate and the amount of time it takes to complete the project. Permit fees and inspection fees can also add to the overall cost of the project. It is important to obtain a detailed estimate from a qualified electrician before starting any electrical work. The estimate should include a breakdown of the costs for materials, labor, permits, and inspections. The estimate should also specify the scope of work and the timeline for completion. When selecting an electrician for a project, it is important to choose a qualified and experienced professional. Check the electrician's license and insurance to ensure that they are properly licensed and insured to perform electrical work in your area. Ask for references from previous clients and check their online reviews. Get multiple bids from different electricians before making a decision. Choose an electrician who is knowledgeable, reliable, and provides a fair price. Remember that the lowest bid is not always the best choice. It is important to consider the electrician's qualifications, experience, and reputation when making your decision. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that your electrical project is completed safely, legally, and to your satisfaction. Reporting suspected illegal electrical work is a crucial step in protecting public safety. Here's how you can do it. Firstly, gather information. Document everything you know about the project, including the location, the type of work being done, the names of any individuals involved, and any evidence of code violations such as lack of permits or unsafe wiring practices. Secondly, contact the local building department. This is usually the first point of contact for reporting code violations. Explain your concerns and provide them with the information you have gathered. They will typically investigate the matter and take appropriate action. Thirdly, contact the electrical inspector. The electrical inspector is responsible for ensuring that electrical work meets code requirements. They can investigate the project and issue warnings or fines if violations are found. Fourthly, contact the state licensing board. If the electrician involved is not licensed or is performing work outside the scope of their license, you can report them to the state licensing board. They can take disciplinary action against the electrician, including suspension or revocation of their license. Fifthly, remain anonymous if desired. In many cases, you can report suspected violations anonymously. This can protect you from potential retaliation from the individuals involved. Sixthly, follow up on your report. After you have reported the suspected violations, follow up with the authorities to ensure that they are taking action. This can help to ensure that the project is brought into compliance with code requirements. When reporting suspected illegal electrical work, it is important to be as specific and accurate as possible. Provide detailed information about the location of the project, the type of work being done, and any code violations that you have observed. This will help the authorities to investigate the matter and take appropriate action. It is also important to be patient. It may take some time for the authorities to investigate the matter and take action. However, your report can help to protect public safety and ensure that electrical work is performed safely and legally. In summary, avoid bidding on projects that disregard permits, prioritize safety by adhering to regulations, and report any suspected illegal activity to the relevant authorities. This ensures ethical practice and public safety.